right. Okay. So, Chris, so like I said just now with you, I'm super honored to have you on the pod today because I want to say it all started with you. The start of my CRO journey, the first ever call I had was with you. I had no idea what the difference was between uh, CRO for research, analytics. I was completely lost. You took the time to get on a call. You recommended the first ever book, Making Websites Win. I've read that one many times now, so that has helped me tremendously. You helped me how to get into the world of CRO, followed your advice very, very well there. And I feel like you're sort of a mentor to me. So yeah, I'm super, super grateful that we're doing this together. So I want to start off by saying thank you for being here.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, happy to be here, and it was great to meet you. I had a few calls. I'm always happy to chat with people who are new in the industry, and you were super eager, and I could tell with your knowledge and how eager you were that you'd be a great fit for this industry. So I just gave you some guidance and said, hey, you could probably get a job if you try the right way, and then you did. So
Uh,
you did the hard work. So good on you.
Love that. Thank you very much. So for those of you that don't know basically who Chris is, or for those that don't know the amount of experience that you actually have, would you mind giving us just a quick intro on your previous track record?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, I've been using UX and data for about 10 to 12 years now. And it started with a love for data and then a love for UX to try and build things that were usable and loved by customers. And I loved UX so much, I really wanted to get a job in UX, but I couldn't get anything as a junior back then. And then I found CRO, and there wasn't many CROs around in 2017. And an agency took me on because I did have some UX experience, and I'd learned a lot about CRO. So got involved with an agency, spent 2 years there, got to work on large accounts like the largest university in the UK, which was fantastic, and worked alongside other CRO experts and did lots of research and CRO for 2 years. Then I moved to Finland. My partner lives here, so I took the leap, which forced me into freelance world, which was interesting. And yeah, it's not what I'd naturally do, but when I was forced to do it, I thought, why not? And it was hard, but it's been great ever since. I've been doing that for 4 years. So essentially CRO and UX now for 7 years total. Probably run over 100 A/B tests, and importantly, lots of UX research projects. I work now with my fiance Laura Algo, so she's my research specialist, and we're like a small team that we like to think of ourselves as more powerful than one freelancer, but we're not an agency. So if a brand wants something different to an agency, something a bit smaller or lightweight, then we're a great fit there. And we work with three e-commerce brands from medium to very large,
Love that.
and I love it.
Yeah, you have every reason
Just
to love it. Sounds like a great situation there. I was wondering, as you were explaining it, what made you take the leap from working in an agency to freelance? And you actually explained that perfectly. Just following your partner, and then now you're working together. It sounds like a dream come true. And a question I had then, which I think is quite a bit of a debate, and I'd love to get your opinion or your feedback on that is when does it start making sense for some from CRO brands to actually, or even companies to start doing CRO? Like, when are they too small? Do they maybe not have enough traffic? When's the sort of proper time for them to start? And then what are your first steps as well when onboarding a new client?
so if we're talking CRO, are you specifically talking about A/B testing?
Yes, yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, the rule of thumb is approximately 50,000 users per month,
Mhm.
perhaps 2,000 conversions per month. But it's a bit hard to do it with that amount, so you could double it, and then you've got a larger data set when you test, and you can pick up smaller changes. So 100K users per month is great, but it really depends on the brand as well. Like the stakeholders at the brand, they need to get it and want to do it because it has to come from the top. If it's just been put on them and they just want wins and quick wins, easy wins, then that's not the right kind of foundations. So it's about the traffic being enough, but the stakeholders need to want to learn about the audience and build great experiences and be willing to learn and fail and then grow as an outcome.
That's one of the challenges, isn't it? To actually get them involved in it and fully on board and understand that, yeah, if a test doesn't win, it doesn't mean that you wasted time or that it was useless. You could have learned a lot from it. Like with your experience, I'm curious then, how do you typically get people that aren't as involved, or they just think CRO is like, okay, you do a quick change here and you double the revenue. But when they realize that's not always how it goes, how do you get them a little bit more maybe educated on it and more involved as a process?
Yeah, definitely. So it's about learning where they're at, which can happen in the sales meetings beforehand as well, anyway. So you really need to find out how much they understand the fundamentals of experimentation and the whys and of UX and the whys of that. And so if they don't understand much about it, then I talk them through it, which could just be 15 or 20 minutes going through a few slides. I actually prefer to explain UX first and the benefits of improving experiences. So that, for example, there's 3 studies out there which show on a monetary level that improving UX improves ROI. So I show them that because stakeholders love revenue and the bottom line. So they need to see the link there with improving UX, improves the bottom line. And then I sort of teach them about UX and say it's about improving the experience. It's not just random changes. You watch what's happening and see what issues there are or what motivations there are that you can sort of use and improve on. So actually a good visual is the remote control from like the 90s, because it's got like 100 buttons on it and it's really hard to use. And there's images online where people have covered it up and they show just 3 buttons for their nan, so that their their grands can use remote control. And this is an example of UX and improving user experiences. And it's really visual. It's like, oh wow, yeah. So you see an issue, you fix the design, it improves the experience. And then I would explain that about conversion optimization and A/B testing, and how that's essentially one method to validate and to experiment and test and check your hypothesis. It's the most powerful method. If you can't do that, then you can still do all the research and useful research-backed updates to the site anyway. But if you can test, then that's even better. And another interesting thing I like to share, because I'm not intuitive, is that I would ask them if you had a random test idea, okay, you're passionate about this test idea, what % chance do you think it will have to win? Because as humans, we think, oh, quite high. Oh, yeah, I could think of something, perhaps 40%, 50%, 60%. But the data shows it's at way lower, and that unfortunately our ideas only have like a 10 or 15% chance to improve KPIs. So sort of get people understanding what's going on here, and that it's not intuitive, but it's hard to actually boost KPIs and change experiences to do that. And then I explained that when you do really good CRO that has a lot of research backing it, then these tests actually raise to 20 to 30% of them win compared to 10% of random ideas. So you get like a 2 to 3 times improvement in win rates, but it's still, of course, there's a lot of tests that don't win. So we just have to get them on board with that and understand that, which is useful as well.
Yeah, of course. I do. Yeah, they're winners, or you can always learn from them. But I love that answer. It's super complete. And like you said, I think if you factually show it to the owner or the stakeholders why it's really a good idea, and you give them examples, like you said with the remote, it just makes sense. Or when you show them in terms of the numbers. I also had a client call not too long ago where they were convinced on collection pages that all the way at the bottom they had a line and they saw like, this is a really good line, why don't people convert? And I showed them the heat map, the scroll depth, and there was maybe 5 to 8% of people that saw that line. And before showing them, they were convinced that everyone sees it. But once you actually show them that that's not always the case, or you just show them factually, like you just said, with different examples, the amount of like percentages, they always seem to know a little bit more, be more open to your ideas because, yeah, you're showing them facts and data. You also maybe you answered a little bit this question already when you said like data-driven hypotheses, but when you, on a sort of broader level, how can you sort of do CRO efficiently and not try to avoid as many mistakes as possible? And also, is there any room for automation in that sort of process there?
Yeah, that's a big question. The automation, I can just quickly say, just yeah, do aim to automate where possible.
Mhm.
Of course, improve efficiency there. So have an awareness of if you're constantly copying and pasting or putting things in multiple places, and think about how you can improve that. So if you can just like create a report items once in one area and then have that be the one place and you don't have to keep putting it elsewhere or sending it elsewhere, like that area could create the report and be a hub of knowledge. Automation, yeah, it's very important and it will improve every year over the years. So we need to keep an eye on it and see how we can keep improving it.
Mhm.
And when it comes to not making mistakes, and did you say efficiency as well?
Yeah, how can you do CRO efficiently?
Yeah. So there's a lot there. Um, Efficiency can just come over time, I guess, when you keep doing reps,
Mhm.
and you keep learning, keep working out like what's useful and valuable and not to brands or to CRO. Um, Not making mistakes. I mean, we will make mistakes. Of course, there will always be some mistakes, which is always fun. And but as long as they're low and they're small amounts or low risk, low, yeah, they don't cause issues, then it's okay. But to not make mis or to lower the amount of mistakes, it just it makes me think of trustworthy experimentation,
Okay.
which is a kind of a big topic and really important. And it just involves quite a lot in a way because, like, really, a lot of us might just jump in and use a tool without looking at the documentation, for example, whether it's Google Analytics or a heat map tool or even the A/B testing tool. Um, so it's not just understanding CRO and having an awareness of CRO and knowing enough about stats. We also need to know enough about the tools, and there can be kind of traps in them, which
Right.
is, and it's bizarre, but they can have like bad UIs where they don't explain well enough what it's actually showing or not showing, and suddenly we could be using incorrect data or interpreting the data incorrectly. So it's not sexy and it's not fun to read the documentation and the manual, but it pays off. It may take just 30 to 60 minutes to skim through
Mhm.
some documentation of an A/B testing tool just to get grounded and familiar with how they do things and what they recommend. Um, and the same, but perhaps more time with GA4. But it's so worth it because you find the odd things and you're like, whoa, holy smokes, I didn't expect that. And I need to be careful about that. Um, and then, yeah, trustworthy experimentation, get familiar with stats and a couple of key concepts there, which I'll share now or through the call. Because one revolutionized how I interpret data, and
Oh,
it was I'll share it now. Which I took a course by Ronnie Kohavi from Microsoft and Airbnb, which was fantastic. And something he mentioned was Twyman's law,
mm,
um, which is like a data law, which has been called the most important law in data analysis. So, whoa, that sounds good. What's that then? And he said, it's the law is uh, any figure or result that's very surprising is likely incorrect.
okay.
Like,
Okay.
whoa, okay, yeah, that's such a good
So
guideline.
you're telling me that the test that is after 2 days up by 200% isn't really maybe a winner sometimes.
Exactly, yeah, and that's why it all comes back to this law. And this law actually came from like a scientist, Carl Sagan, I think it was, who said uh, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Mm,
And then data scientists merged that into their world and said, if a result is super surprising, then it's likely bad data or incorrect. And I've paraphrased that a bit because the super surprising is what it's about. The more you raise your eyebrows, the more unlikely the data is correct. And you're right. And I've had messages before after like 5 days, like, whoa, this is up 170% conversion rate, which is unexpected, and you'd never see that normally. And I had to say, hey team, sorry, bad news, but we need to check the tracking.
Yeah.
And the tracking was incorrect. Tracking wasn't set up properly, it wasn't tracking correctly, so the tracking had to be fixed, the test had to be restarted because the data was incorrect. So, but they were saying, "Oh, this looks great, Chris."
Yeah. Let's
It says,
implement this. Yeah. Okay. That is super
yeah,
interesting.
trustworthy. That's the rule that I love to live by. Ronnie Carvey has a book called Trustworthy Online Controlled Experiments. I highly recommend. And yeah, this law has saved me. That data law has saved my ass a bunch of times over the years. Yeah, I'm passionate about trustworthiness, and I'd like to do some content on that actually, because I think there's not much about that
Yeah.
out there, because it's not very sexy, but it's
No.
so
It's it's
required.
it's also what I've noticed with CRO. Not that I've been in that this game, let's say, for a long time, but since the time you and I we spoke the first time, which I would say is maybe 1.5 year ago, roughly, something around there, maybe 1 year. But at the
Yeah,
beginning, when you just look into CRO, you see some really sexy claims like, "Oh, CRO can 2x your revenue with just one simple test." And you think, wow, why isn't everyone doing it? And when you learn more about it, you see it's actually a lot more complex than that. But the law you just mentioned actually is super interesting. And I'd love to actually, go more into that as well, because if it's not sexy, but it's super important, I think. And it also allows for a lot of maybe people that either are in a CRO role or maybe brand owners that have a CRO agency to avoid, I think, some maybe negative like winners. It's like false positives when it seemed like a winner, but actually it isn't really a winner. So what would you say then beginner CROs make in terms of mistakes that you only learn maybe either through making mistakes or through experience to have a more trustworthy approach actually to CRO in general?
yeah, okay. There's a handful of common sort of pitfalls that happen.
Hmm.
Um, and they all affect the data and pollute it more and more. One is like running the test for either too short of a time frame and peaking,
Hmm.
and then stopping the test because you see a win. So, and actually, if I go back a step, this stems from not planning the test,
Okay.
essentially, like not actually stating. So before a test, we need to state we're going to run this test for X weeks,
Yeah.
because then that solves the problem, and we can check the data to see that we'll catch an uplift in that amount of weeks. If you don't do that, then after 1 week or 2 weeks, you might think, "Wow, there's a good lift there, a good win there. We could stop it there,"
Mm.
but you're at risk of ending it too early. So there's definitely one. Another one is a bit of an odd one, but to soft launch a test, some people might not want it to go to 100% of the relevant traffic to start with. They might want it to go to 10% of traffic
Hmm.
to soft launch it and lower risk, check the data comes in and such, which in a roundabout way isn't that worthwhile anyway, because all you're doing is slowing down the time to insight.
Hmm.
So you're just slowing down getting that data that might tell you something. But the way to do that would be to only let 10% of the whole experiment traffic in.
Hmm.
Whereas a lot of people will put 90% of traffic on the original and 10% of traffic on the variation. Tools literally shouldn't let you do that. They shouldn't let you change the split between the original and the variation, because it completely pollutes the data, mainly because of return users,
Yeah.
actually, because that 90% bucket will have way more return users getting into it. And then when you move them to be a 50-50 split on A versus B, the one that had 90% will still remain with more return users. And how do return users behave? They're
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They convert at a higher rate. So I've seen this happen, and all you're doing is you shoot yourself in the foot in a way as well, because the original, if you're letting more return users into the the originals got an upper hand because those users convert well. Just to see if I can think of anything else. Um,
Well, I mean, those two are already super interesting, and it's true. You don't always think about it. Maybe you just think on the first layer, okay, putting less traffic, and then we'll slowly see what happens. But like you said, in the long term, you're inevitably shooting yourself in the foot. So it's just not even one of the very, very good trick in that case. Then you mentioned the course you did where you learned about the Women's Law. You said,
yeah.
is there anything else you took away from that course where you thought, okay, not enough people know about this, and they should?
Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah. I took that course after about maybe 3 to 4 years in experimentation and CRO, and I still learned so much. And I've taken other courses before that, CXL course and many courses. There was lots of little nuggets. Twyman's law was always the one that stood out the most. A good tip that he did say was, it sounds like a no-brainer, but we might forget.
Mhm.
But he said if you have the traffic, run more variations,
Okay.
because you give yourself another shot.
Yeah.
So
So,
an A/B/C test is much better than an A/B test, because if you a couple of different reasons, not only do you have more shots,
mhm,
but the team and that are running the test, you might actually try something a bit different. I go, oh, we've got this room, this testing slot, this fourth or third variation
yeah,
that we could run. We haven't actually got an idea yet. Can anyone brainstorm a different solution that fits the hypothesis?
okay.
So it helps you get a bit creative with that. So lots of little sort of tips like that, that sort of built, sort of like sprinkled and added to the foundations of my CRO knowledge. Um,
I think
yeah,
the little nuggets, like you said, there ultimately bring a big difference. If you make a little change here, little change here, little change here, at the end you're making big changes and you're making also a lot smarter decisions. If we go a little bit, let's say more like even before running any tests, you need to do a lot of user research. How, with your experience, then, how do you get the most out of your actual research, and how do you then apply also those learnings that you get from it?
when I was a junior CRO, I did it on a simple level where I just did research,
Mhm,
tried to find test ideas from that research and run tests, which isn't too bad, but it's not strategic CRO.
mhm,
And it could end up a scattergun approach of CRO where you're just trying data backed ideas, but there's no themes there. There's
okay,
just different ideas and see what happens.
mhm,
Uh, Better than not testing, but over the years I've realized the importance of being strategic and how to do that.
okay,
And so when I'm doing the research, there's kind of like two ways you'll need to do it. You need to kind of like have that overview all the time, like,
mhm,
or over the months, where you can pick up on the themes, like the key themes. It could be 3 or 4 key themes that appear throughout the research. Second thing is you need to log that, so because it's so important. So perhaps you're using Airtable or Google Sheets or something. So you log these key themes, and suddenly you can start, when these research insights keep appearing, you can link them to these key themes. So say, for example, you're saying socks, and the key themes might appear in surveys, in reviews. When you're listening to the audience and trying to learn from them, you might keep hearing, oh, durability actually seems to be the biggest theme. So that's
mhm,
what they're all talking about. Or it could be durability and looks and how cool they look, or comfort. It's like, which are these actual top themes? Um, which surveys can really help as well. Once you learn the broad themes, you can run surveys and get the quantitative data on those points. And you can see, like, wow, actually free shipping is like ranked number 7 in importance. When you ask the audience to rank them, you're like, wow, wait, we don't need to worry about free shipping. Maybe we should test around that, or hide it and don't lower its visibility so we can give other things better visibility. So yeah, it's learning, being aware of these themes, which you can think of as CRO pillars, and structuring your program and your tests around those pillars. So you might, instead of testing on only one pillar
mhm.
for 3 months or something, you could test over multiple pillars throughout time, see how they perform. And I think strategically it's really cool to sort of like learn, see where you're getting the lifts, and then think about doubling down. And this is a second thing I didn't do as a junior CRO. So a test may win, and I'll be like, oh, so that's great, you know, we all want that. Even though we love learning, we love a win. So we share it to the client, and then we would move on with the next test that was already planned. And it's like, oh my God, looking back, why didn't I just realize this? But you know, others were running in the program, and someone else was doing the strategy and evaluating the roadmap over the months. I wasn't a part of that. Now it's like when a test finishes, whether it loses or wins, you need to think, wow, what can we do with that result? You know, if it loses, can we flip what we did and do the opposite? If it wins, then how do we maximize on that? How if we wanted to test again and improve on that, how would we do that? Could we test a similar theme in a different area of the user journey? You know, could we test it in the same area but in a different solution? Because you may have well, when you have got a win, it may not actually still may not be the best solution. If there's different designs or UX solutions, then that could be to another step up on, because you've found something that does move the needle. Now you've got a chance to test again. So strategic CRO I'm passionate about, and yeah, it's about, for me, it's about spotting those themes and really thinking when a test wins and you're analyzing it, really think about how that can move on to an iteration test.
There's so much value in that. And I also love the part of once you have a winner, not just think, okay, great, next, but it's like, okay, why did it win? If it's maybe adding some guarantee on a page, maybe it's super important so people want to see it on other parts of the website. But it does then also, you know, the question comes up where there are different themes. Imagine you picked a wrong theme or a theme that doesn't deliver a lot of good results. You know, I think we've sadly all been there where we had quite a few test ideas. None of them really result in winners. Sure, maybe you learn a lot from it, but the stakeholders, they don't really care about you learn something. They're a bit like, money's going out, but there's not a lot of money coming in, you know. How do you generally communicate that to sort of soften the blow maybe a little bit and make them understand that it's not wasting time here? Actually, the quicker we know what doesn't work, the quicker we're going to know what works. How do you communicate that?
Yeah, that's important. So I do that before the test and after the test. So but I help this by before a test. Don't always, but sometimes I remind stakeholders, you know, this has, especially if the test has a lot of effort, then I'll remind them and say, you know, this has been a great effort. We've done our best, but the test has about a 25% chance to win, maybe a 30% chance to win. Now we've got that shot on target. We just have to see if it scores. So that sets the expectations well, so that once the test is completed, if it hasn't won, they're a lot more open to that outcome. I think that's really useful. And then, of course, it's how you frame it.
Yeah.
When it finishes, you can flip the viewing a loss. You can turn it around and say we've now prevented that loss. So doesn't work for an inconclusive flat result. But if the test loses statistically and significantly, then you can say, hey, we've learned a lot here. You know, we need to really delve into this and see why it had such an adverse negative effect. And we've actually prevented this loss, which would have been X amount throughout that, you know, testing period. You can imagine how that could be an ongoing loss. So that's another sort of useful method to reframe things, and it's not really blagging it or anything, because it's truth. It's literally what we've done. We may have thought that was the right course, but initially we thought it was a good idea, and then we've learned, okay, it's not a good idea. Let's stop that there and move on. Yeah, so it's communicating it well.
Very, very valuable. Yeah, I love especially the one where you clearly tell them how much effort goes into it, you know. So for them, if they don't know it, it's just another test. But if you're like, okay, we did a lot of research, we spent a lot of time, we're confident, the numbers are maybe a little bit against us. Like you said, we have a 25 or 30% chance, but we're going to try. It always clearly sets the expectations more. So I find that very valuable. And I'm going to do that from now on 100%. You mentioned different pillars then. how do you decide then? Because when you're doing your research, you obviously see a ton of people maybe complain, maybe, or they have things to say about the price, about the website, about questions they have. Maybe if it's closed, it's not the right size. How do you decide? Okay, this is a theme or pillar we're going to focus on, and we're going to do some test ideas on this, and some others where like this doesn't maybe need as much attention right now. How do you sort of prioritize that?
So it's over time, perhaps over the first 3 months of a CRO program when you're doing a bit more research because it's so important. And it's literally, it can get a bit subjective, but you do essentially say we've got all this data coming in, which says these are the important themes, so that's what we're going to test on. Although interestingly, part of being strategic, I should have highlighted this earlier because, of course, I'm so passionate about the users and
Mhm,
learning about the users. But there's like one or two other important factors. There was obviously the business.
mhm,
So in fact, there's kind of three parts to the puzzle. There's the users, the business, and then the marketplace and competitors. These other parts of the bigger picture can feed into different test ideas. It's not that we're completely locked down to having to test on certain themes.
mhm,
There is some wiggle room, and there should be some sort of like give and take. Like if a test idea has massive buy-in from senior leadership or the CEO or the folks at the top, then it gets more importance because of their judgment. They haven't just on a whim, or we may speak to them about it and learn why it's needed, and it could be just a business strategy. Like it's the route that the business is planning to go, and the test facilitates that, which is fine as well. So that's the fun thing about CRO is that you don't have to be locked into a roadmap for
mhm.
3 or 6 months and not move from that. You got a rough roadmap and things can sort of like change over time,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
makes it good and bad. It's like
Yeah,
it's good because you can't project manage it perfectly, but you have to just hold your hands up and be willing to
yeah.
have that as the ride.
Yeah, it's less predictable, but at least there's less maybe routine where you now know what's going to happen in 6 months. There's less of a surprise, I guess, there. So you mentioned change. How do you then know when a test you should just give up on a test because you've tried it maybe one, two, three times and you're like, okay, this we're not getting anywhere. We've done iterations and it's not worth it. And then the second part to that question is when you do get a winner, how do you decide, okay, it's a winner because of what we did, and it's not because of another reason. Maybe it pushed something down which you didn't expect. So yeah, that's a two-part question.
Yeah, dealing with the second part first, you can't ever know for sure if your test 100%
Hmm.
caused effect. But the reason that we test and get the statistical data is so that we can have a high degree of confidence in that. So what we need to do is not feel like we can detect things perfectly and 100% like reliability, but that we're doing the best we can and we're finding things which have a really high chance of what the data says
Hmm.
of that accuracy. There's some statistical underlyings that can go on with this as well. So essentially large data sets are generally a lot more accurate. And you can like look at the like 95% confidence interval and see which shows 95% chance where that roughly essentially shows where the result will fall 95% of the time. So if that interval was really wide, then it would be because you haven't got much data and it's less you've got less sort of like reliability on that result. When you run tests with loads of data, that confidence interval shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, which is really cool to see. And then you're de-risking a lot with that. You're getting more of an accurate read on that result.
Okay.
Um, so it's just about interestingly as well, like I think Microsoft would revalidate, they'd like validate and retest every win to
Oh,
sort of solve this sort of problem and get a higher read on the truth, um,
they
which is
would
an interesting take.
they would do the same test again just to see if they get the same results, or they would do a sort of slight iteration of it.
No, if it was a win, they would do it again.
Well,
I'm not 100% sure of that, but it's something I remember from the course with Ronnie Harvey. I'm fairly sure that they would, yeah. And if you have loads of data and traffic, you can do that, but it's going to slow down your
mm,
testing velocity of other tests and other
yeah,
ideas.
yeah,
Because like Lucas from who used to work at Booking.com, he's always been about just test and run as fast as you can. He's like, get the accurate data and run and test some, just keep testing, keep running. He's about the sort of the velocity,
yeah.
but the quality test as well. So it's about the organization and what you need with that. What was the first part of the
Yeah,
question?
no problem. The first part was how do you decide and when a test you should just give up, whether it's an entire pillar, you think, okay, this isn't getting us anywhere, let's just move on. How do you decide and you just cut the cord at that moment?
Yeah, good question. I used to think, yeah, I think that as well.
Mm.
Well, I learned from Ronnie Harvey. He said, at some point you've got to decide.
I'm definitely
And
going to
you
read
know,
his book after this. Sorry, just quickly, because you Make Your Website Win is the first book you mentioned. Now I'm definitely going to have to read his book. I mean, there's so much value coming from it as well. So,
yeah, the book's good. I did prefer his course. It's
okay.
more expensive and but it's only like 5 hours of like 1 hour sessions, I think. So it's quite easy going and it's just more accessible and interesting and engaging. But the book, definitely get the book to delve in and start with. It's
I
just a bit
will.
more dry, the book.
Okay, I'll do both then. Why not? Let's do both. But yeah, sorry, you were saying about tests and when to stop.
Yeah, and I think it was him or another expert had said you've just got to like know at some point you've got to move on. It might be the third iteration that it's lost, and you're like, okay, we just need to move on from this concept or this type of test idea. I think, running zero iterations is a problem because you're not giving different UX solutions or design solutions a
Mhm.
chance on a data. If the problem is data backed and research backed, then sometimes it's subjective. Sometimes you run one test and you know from that it makes sense to move on.
Yeah.
Um, it can depend on the test and whether there's a good opportunity to iterate and try it again. I guess that's the best explanation. Yeah. Um, if you think, oh man, we weren't sure what to do with that test, like we went with that variation, we could only run one variation, but we actually considered this other solution and we didn't do it, then that's your chance to iterate and try the other solution.
Okay,
Um,
that's good to keep in mind.
yeah. And a third iteration can sometimes be worth it. But then after that, it's like chasing down a path that might not be the right path. And eventually you've got to just cut it and move on.
Instinctively, also maybe now, like every test we've done has just not brought us anything valuable. Let's just move on now. We are getting closer to the end. I do have some rapid fire questions. Just before we get into those, I have one last question, which is, what would you say are things as CRO practitioners um, that you are looking out for in the near future, whether it's this year or maybe next year, just near future? What are trends or things you are looking out for?
Yeah, I think it's the obvious really these days, which is utilizing AI.
Yeah.
And I love how tools are building that in for us.
Mhm.
So Microsoft Clarity have built AI in fairly well into their tool. So session recordings can be quite slow to review. Their current AI solution, it's not amazing because it's somewhat limited. It can look at the top 10 results
Mhm.
and give you a summary based on those session recordings, which is still a great kind of like overview. And then you know whether to dig in or not. But it's going to get better and better over time. It will look at more sessions, or you may be able to even give it a prompt and say, this is, tell it what you want to learn about. And then it can try and find sessions related to that or whether there's issues on that or not. It's going to be, I just love how it's going to progress. But another thing I really just makes me think of what I want from tools.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, some CROs are doing great work with doing the AI stuff themselves, like crunching survey data and stuff, and that's great. But and I'm starting with that and trying to do that as well. But I love how the tools are going to be doing this for us. Because with Shopify, for example, I mean, I get data questions from stakeholders all the time, like are we, how are the quantities selling these days? Are people buying more of the 3 times items than they were before? How's things shifted there, or how's the colors purchases changed, and things like that? And is there anything we need to be aware of or work on from that? And it's just going to be so amazing to ask Shopify these questions and have it just tell us, just look at the data and tell us, and then let us dig in and check the data as well. So any data question that we get, it can take, sometimes 30 or 60 plus minutes to get the answer, or even longer, because you got to understand what they want, what they want to learn to start with, and then you got to like make sure you're getting good data. It can take some cleaning sometimes, so you've got to extract the data, process it, transform it, or maybe load it somewhere, and then get your insight manually, or from what you can see. So yeah, really looking forward to that. Tools building in AI, and people building AI tools for CROs is going to be amazing.
So yeah, I also had a chat the other day with someone who was saying that generative hypothesis test ideas for AI is also going to be something. So who knows how powerful that's going to be? But yeah, if you just give it the data from, I don't know, post-purchase survey, for example, and you ask it to generate 5 test ideas, that's really going to optimize our time, but hopefully not too much, because otherwise, why do they even need us anymore? So I think it also is going to depend on the quality of the questions you can ask the chat GPT or the tool, and that's also going to give you some better insights. But yeah, I love that answer on keeping an eye out for AI. Now, are you ready for some quick rapid fire questions?
Yeah, sure. I'll try not to waffle. Let's try
No,
and
no,
go
no
quick.
worries, no worries at all. What's your favorite place on Earth to visit?
Oh, anywhere in nature, probably, or maybe the snow as well. A bit of snow sports.
Oh, nice.
Um,
Okay.
yeah,
You're
yeah, yeah. I work in the office a lot, so it's good to get out as well.
yeah,
How
anywhere
about
that's
you?
not in the office, I guess, right? Just being out.
Yeah, exactly.
I maybe have a bit of an idea as to what you're going to say here, but what's your favorite book?
Oh, yeah. I've definitely one jumps to mind. It's a bit like your favorite album or anything. You can have multiples, but
Yeah.
a recent one was Fahrenheit 517, I think it was, or something. Which was a sci-fi book, which was amazing because it's written in a really poetic way,
Mhm.
but not like in an annoying poetic way. I've never even been into poetry before, but the pace of the writing and the style, it was just beautiful. It was like a really cool story, but it didn't even need to be a good story, just the way it was written.
Wow.
So the author's Ray Bradbury,
Okay.
and it's a sci-fi book. It's a really cool concept. I'll quickly say it's about a world where books are illegal and firemen burn books. Uh,
Oh, okay. That sounds
because they
interesting.
they give too much wacky ideas, and it obviously a like interesting concept where they wanted lots of control.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, Fahrenheit 451, I think it is.
Okay. I'll definitely give that a read then, because it sounds super interesting. I like that concept. I'd love to go more into it, but I mean, yeah, let's just try and focus on these last quick couple questions. What are are your 3 favorite people to follow when it comes to CRO?
Oh, lots of mainly LinkedIn, more of a platform and channel I prefer.
Okay.
It's hard to define people, but there's loads of great content on LinkedIn. You have Johan von Tondo, Craig Sullivan, the old legends, um, Iqbal Ali. He's really into the AI and processing survey data. Um, yeah, and Shiva as well. He got me really focused on the test to learn approach and the benefits of that. So yeah, I think LinkedIn is your best bet. Twitter's good for fun and inspiration, but I find there's a bit more meaty content on LinkedIn.
I mean, you say inspiration on Twitter. All I see is guys that are 15 years old and multi-billionaires already. So I try to not spend too much time there because it just depresses
Yeah,
me if anything. But yeah, what's your
that's true.
what,
I was being kind,
yeah,
but yeah, I
what's your proud or one of your proudest moments in your career you've had?
Think it would have to be going freelance because I wasn't naturally a salesperson or didn't think I could sell.
Yeah,
So I had to learn how to do that. So I had to ensure I was super knowledgeable and confident about CROs that I could then learn a bit about selling, and being able to just go out and meet great clients and work with great clients, and bring my partner on board as well as a research specialist. It's the proudest moment. But then again, giving back's great, and I've only like mentored or about 4 or 5 different people, but I'm super proud when I see them progress, and get a new job or really love and thrive in the field. Yeah.
I love that answer. And then the last question is, if you could have dinner with anyone that has ever lived, who would it be and why?
Or maybe Jesus or something,
Oh
and then see if
wow.
he's saying he was a bit of a blagger. No, I don't know. Because like if it was someone like Einstein, I'll be so out my depth. I'll just ask something that is already known now,
Yeah,
or or known back then.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, someone from any, or just a random someone from 200 years ago, or like a business entrepreneur from 100 or 200 years ago would be interesting to pick their brain. Yeah.
True. Maybe John D. Rockefeller or someone like that who was really successful back then. But interesting, interesting idea. So that's it. Chris, you've been amazing. You've helped me out so much since the first call we've had. You've given, again, a ton of valuable information here. So thank you for yet another amazing chat. Where can our listeners find you to best connect with you?
Cheers, Chris. Yeah, been great to join you. Look me up on LinkedIn. So if you search Chris Marsh, CRO, or Data Chris, so connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm about to start sharing some more content there. Hit me up if you've got any questions.
Love it.
Yep.
Okay. Chris, you've been amazing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good day, good week. It's been great to chat.
And I never know how to end. I'll trim it. Okay, here we go.